What's going on, folks? Welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, my name's Chris and I'm building a business that suits my lifestyle. Now, over the last couple of weeks, we have been talking about what is your biggest problem on eBay or reselling at this point in time. Now, I went through and I got a lot of results and a lot of answers from you all. Last week, we actually addressed the first topic, which is about being efficient, being productive. And we went through and answered some of your questions and went through in a deep dive of how you could probably answer a lot of these questions for yourself, but also giving you some insight of my own experience. Now, in today's video, we're actually going to be touching on topic number 2, or the area that seems to be the second most common area that you have a problem in, and that is in inventory and space management. Now, this one is a big one, and it's absolutely key that you get it right from the start. Now, if you haven't got it right from the start, that's okay. We can help you out here, and I'm still learning and still adjusting and doing things, always trying to do them better, because we always got to be learning. So in today's video, I'm going to give you 2 things. First thing is I'm going to take you through 7 things that are absolutely crucial to ensure that you have optimized inventory and space management. And then the second thing that we're going to go through is answering some of the questions that came from my video I did a couple of weeks ago that you guys have kind of asked. So let's dive in. So when it comes to reselling, whether you're selling on eBay, whether you're selling somewhere else, it doesn't really actually matter. Whether you are a small business or a large business, inventory management and space management or storage management is absolutely crucial. Sure that you do have efficiency and productivity in your business, but that's not really the point here. The point is, as your business grows, your inventory grows, and you will get challenges where it can become quite overwhelming to, itemize, to manage, to sort, to store, to, pick and pack and find and identify where things are, especially as volume increases. So really, you want to make sure that you do have an effective and, well thought out inventory and management system. So here are 7 essential things that I think you need to take into account starting from scratch. And this doesn't matter if you're doing 1 item a week or 1,000 items a week. I think we can all learn something from this. And the first one is, and I'm going to put it all up on screen so you can have a look if you want to go at your own pace, but I'm going to read them out anyway. The first one is dedicated storage space. Now, whether you're starting from scratch at home or whether you've got a warehouse or you've got a storage unit like myself, you need to have a dedicated space for it. Now, this could be either like a shelf or a corner in a room, or just a dedicated space or a specific place where your inventory can be organized, basically where it's stored and it can prevent it from getting misplaced or getting damaged. It doesn't matter. Now, obviously, as you scale, that would scale too. So for instance, I have a storage unit, which is only for my listed items, for the items that I'm picking, packing and sorting and, going out the door. Whereas when I originally started, I had a dedicated room for it. What I did make the mistake on was I had multiple rooms that I was storing things, and I wasn't skewing things, and I didn't have a good inventory management system in place. That's a whole different conversation. And that's actually point number 2, inventory tracking system, which essentially is just like skewing your items. Now, again, this could be done via a simple spreadsheet. It could be done through software. It could be doing from your own tracking or whatever. But you need to understand where is it stored and its current status, as it's absolutely crucial when you need to find it. So, if you're selling certain different things, like if you're selling only books, you can have a certain SKU system for your books. If you're selling DVDs, if you're selling video games, if you're selling clothing, you might have a different SKU system for that. But essentially, a SKU system is just a way to label what is the item. For instance, if you've got 100 pieces of clothing, you might label it 1 to 100, and you know that, okay, if I sell item number 80, I need to pull out item number 80, and that's the one I need to post. But you also need to have it in a place and a location that is easy to find. So where is 80 going to be? It's going to be in box, is it from box 70 to 80, or how do you categorize it? So that needs to come into play. And there's multiple ways you can do this. I'm not saying there's right or wrong ways. There's probably better ways. But depending on the size of your operation, it will vary on what makes more sense to do. And if you have questions about this, more than happy to dive into it a bit more. Point number 3 is to regularly review and rotate your stock or inventory. So you want to review on a periodic basis, identifying, what's slow moving, what's not selling, what is selling, and what, do you need to get more of. And as we rotate stock, especially if it's a seasonal thing or a trendy thing, we can start to ensure that the fast selling items are, obviously easily accessible and up the front, or in the most easiest way to access, because if they're the things that are selling at the door the most, they're the things you want to be accessing the most. So keeping that in mind as well. But at the same time, you want to be doing that regular review anyway to see if you can liquidate stuff and, get that storage space back to ensure that you can put things in there that are going to sell. The next one is optimal storage solutions. Now, this actually comes down to what you're storing things in. It could be storage bins or tubs. That's what I started with, but now I use a lot of shelving units, especially for my clothing. They're now in boxes in a shelving unit in bags, and they all are sequentially labeled from 1 to, I think we're up to 2,300 at the moment. So shelving units, using label makers to organize your items. And vertical storage solutions is absolutely key here as well to maximize space in tight areas. It's straightforward. The next one is efficient listing process. Now, when it comes to def piles, and we're going to touch on that briefly today, it's a dreaded part of the business. Def piles are great if you're getting through them, but if you're not touching them, it's not good. You need to have a system in place to consistently work through your def piles, whether it's getting rid of it, whether it's selling it, whether it's listing it, whether it's photoing it, whether it's processing it, whatever it may be. It might be setting aside time, it might be setting aside a specific day, or it might be setting aside one of your workers to do it. I don't know. Batch it, but get it done, right? You need to have a process for it. The next one is space expansion plan. I think something that I failed to do was knowing that as I am ambitious and wanting to grow, not considering how I'm going to grow into the business. So, if all of a sudden someone come up to you and say, hey, look, I've got 10,000, DVDs, do you want to buy them? You'll be like, I don't have the space for them, which is fine. But having a plan of, okay, if that did happen, how can you make it work? Or how much space do you have to be able to, what is the maximum amount of things that you can purchase? And when you understand that, it means that you're able to grow comfortably and not overwhelm yourself. Because if you can't fit it in, or it doesn't make sense, maybe you shouldn't be buying it. Because if you can't even process 10 items a week, how are you going to process 10,000? Get my point. Now, the next one is kind of coming back to the regular review and rotation, but inventory reduction strategies. This is number 7, and you want to have strategies in place to ensure that you are reviewing and cycling out or discounting, bundling, donating, or recycling items that don't sell, that are taking up space that you need to free up. Now, I'm in the process of doing this with books, with media items, and just stuff that I don't want to sell anymore. It's a hard process, I get it, but it has to be done. Right, so that's the 7 essential things that I wanted to cover. Now we're going to dive into some of the questions that you guys actually had over the last couple of weeks in regards to your problems with inventory and space management. And look, some of this we've probably already answered, but why is it essential to actually keep inventory separate from personal space? Well, one, it ensures easy access. It enables a mental space for you to be able to execute without distraction, but it also reduces risk of damage and it helps you maintain that work-life balance. Now, I operated from home for a very long time, and having the separation or segregation of tasks and locations of work made it so much better. And that's why now the storage unit works so well, because I'm there and I'm just working. I'm not there to do anything else. I can't get distracted, and it makes it so much more efficient and effective. How can beginners tackle space constraints at home? I think if you've got too much stuff, you need to make a decision of like setting yourself some boundaries and rules and expectations, right? So start by decluttering, or that you're not going to go source anymore until you've, removed the same amount that you're going to source from your home or from your store, or, declutter things, right? I think also using vertical space is going to make a big difference rather than just using, dumping grounds. But also thinking about, how you can actually maximize your space, but also putting in the rules that if you can't fit it in here, then it doesn't fit your model, right? Starting with those boundaries, starting with those rules. I know people that have a room full of stuff, a room over there full of stuff, out the back full of tubs with those kind of things. Like I do too. I've got def piles everywhere, and I'm still working through them. But now when I go forward, I don't make those same mistakes. I'm still cleaning up mistakes I made from a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. So you want to be on top of this from day one. If you don't have a process and plan in place to manage how you're going to be cycling through dead stuff or dead stock or def piles, or, just the overwhelming of heaps of stuff, then you're not going to be able to make it in this business. I'm sorry, that's just the reality of it, is because you become more of a hoarder than a seller. And look, that's at home, right? Even if you get a storage space or a warehouse, same thing. You don't want to have dead stock in there because it's just wasting space, which is wasting money. Are there any basic tools or methods to keep inventory organized? Look, I think keeping it simple, stupid. So back to the basics of labeling things from, 1 to 1,000 sequential, it really does come down to what you're selling. And there's a few different people that have a few different models that do this. Like Grumpy Granny has a really good video on how she does her books. Two Aussie Thrifters have a really good one on how they do their media. I've briefly touched on how I do my clothing, but that's basically following the daily refinement or tech and sports process, where actually it's not even tech and sports, it's actually just daily refinement, where it's just a sequential. It's actually following the same model that Drew uses as well, Drew Trott. He's got a very good model with his clothing. So it really comes down to what you're using and finding something that's efficient but simple. How can one avoid over acquiring items as a beginner? Look, you got to set the boundaries, you got to set the rules, you got to set the expectations. So set a budget, have a clear sourcing strategy, and have a regular check-in or review of things that are working and things that aren't. So if you're spending $100 a week, but you're not even listing any of those items that you get, why? Is it because you don't enjoy the items? Is it because you don't understand the items? Is it because they're too hard to do? Do you not have the space to store them? Do you not have the space to photo them? What is making you not list them? Therefore, you should never buy them again, but then start focusing on the things that you do enjoy, that make it easy, that you can store, that you can easily photograph. I mean, it makes sense, and that you can afford to purchase. What's a dev pile and how can it be managed? So, okay, if you don't know what a dev pile is, a dev pile refers to a backlog of items essentially waiting to be listed or sold, usually listed, right? And look, the best way to tackle it is being consistent. Like if you've got 1,000 items and you're doing, 10 items a day, well, you can see that it's going to take quite a lot of days to do it. It's going to take 100 days. So being consistent. And that's why I say set consistent goals. I'm not saying you have to do 10 listings a day. It can be 1 listing a day. That's fine, but be consistent, because if you're not consistent, you will never get through it. How can resellers optimize space as the inventory grows? I think we kind of touched on this, but you could start to consider external storage options, maybe having different shelving like modular, but also continuing to rotate stock based on what's working and what's not. How can resellers handle items that aren't selling and taking up space? We've mentioned this as well. So this is when you have to start, bundling things, marking down, offering discounts, or even donating or just freeing up. If you're not making money from it, just because it's been there for 300 days and it's worth, in your head, $10, what's the next one day going to make? Look, someone might come by it, but are you going to wait another 300 days to get $10? Get rid of it. Get rid of it. I'm talking to myself here as well. How can one balance between acquiring new stock and managing existing inventory? I think you need to understand your turnover, your sell-through rate. So if you're purchasing 100 items a month and you list those 100 items and you're selling 30 of them, you've got a 30% sell-through rate. But if you don't sell any more of the remainder 70 over 90 days, you might have a problem. So looking at certain items that are going to continue to sell every 30 days, and if they're not liquidating after 90 days, you might want to think, how can you get them out of the store? When I say liquidating, if they're not selling. So understanding, what's coming in, what's going out, and comparing the data. If you just go to your eBay app and have a look at the total items sold versus the total items listed, you can start to see your sell-through rate in 90 days. And you want to be focusing on stuff that sells quickly, so high demand. How do top resellers maximize space in constrained environments? Well, look, for me, I'm using a storage unit, and I'm now using the storage unit also, the second one, to actually run the operations like photos, sorting the clothing, prepping the clothing, and getting all those things ready. So I think leveraging the space to ensure that you are efficient is probably the best way to maximize it, and having a space for things. And as I said, if you can't fit something in, if you don't have the space to buy something, like for instance, 100 books or 100 boxes of books, then maybe you shouldn't be buying it. Unless it's, they're coming... Look, even just because it's free, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a good deal. You need to look at the opportunities of, you might get 100 books, and if only one of them's worth $1,000 and the rest are just dead weight, really, you still got to get rid of the dead weight. So you got to weigh up, is it worth it? Look, I think the other thing is just making sure you have a systemized layout of, what do you do here? What do you do here? What do you do here? What do you have to do to achieve your goals? Like you have to photo, you have to sort, you have to photo, you have to list, you have to pick, you have to pack, you have to store it, and then you have to get it out. So, what is that process going to look like in the environment that you operate out of? What advanced strategies can be employed to optimize inventory turnover? Look, this one's probably a bit too e-commercey, but Essentially, I think you should review items every 30 days, every 90 days, probably actually even in between that 30, 60, 90 days, and start to get aggressive with it. If you have a margin on, like if you buy something for $5 and your average sale price is around $30, you're probably going to work out with about $15 profit, give or take. So you have a little bit of wiggle room. So after 30 days, can you drop it? After 60 days, can you drop it? After 90 days, can you just get your money back and just add that to the list of don't get this again? But then again, sometimes things do change in time. Like for instance, if I'm buying winter stock today, it's probably not going to sell in summer, right? It's going to sell in winter. So sometimes it's okay to get some of those things, but need having a plan for it as well. I think the other thing is just, understanding of what sells individually versus what sells better as a bundle to add that extra value. If you're able to purchase DVDs at 10 cents a pop, you can now, and 2 Aussie thrifters do this really well, you can now bundle them up and it's only going to cost you $5 to sell, maybe 30 or 40 or, 50, and you could get $50, $60 for it. Again, you're getting a really good margin on that. How do top resellers handle large quantities of items efficiently? I think it really comes down to having an inventory management system. How are you processing that stuff? Having a SKU system of like, once you've listed it, where's it getting stored and how are you going to be able to find it? And then also having a dedicated space to ensure that you are able to list it and store it and ship it effectively. So it isn't rocket science. It's knowing that if you're going to have a process, if you were doing it for one item, will this work for 1,000 items? Because there's going to come a day you'll get 10 sales. So now you have to process 10 sales in that same process. And you'll start to realize, oh my gosh, this is too much work. If it takes you 10 minutes to do one item, and it's because you have to go here to get that, it's not too bad because it's one item. But all of a sudden you have 10 times 10, that's 100 minutes, right? You're getting close to 2 hours to do 10 items. Imagine if you had 30 sales, right? And you got to think about it because someone might come through and purchase a lot. So you start to look at it from that perspective because as you get better, you will sell more. Therefore, you will need to have a better process to manage that. That's of course if you want to get better. Does the market trends or seasonal, time of the year impact inventory management for resellers? Not really. I mean, I think sometimes I might stockpile. I might put things knowing that, look, that will probably pick up again at a different time, especially for Q4. I might buy a lot of toys or collectibles or video games, knowing that people will. So I think you do need to make space for that kind of thing. But at the same time, you can't make that bet on it because if you're just saying, no, it's going to sell in this month and it doesn't, well, again, you're just kind of justifying an excuse of not getting rid of something. So I think you need to be mindful of that. All right, team, that's answering your questions of your problems with inventory and storage and space management. If you do have further questions on this, more than happy to answer. We're going to leave it there. I'm not going to do any more in this video. And if you do want to see my, regular weekly updates, that video will actually come out later this week, just separating it up, just testing things out a little bit. And the purpose of this video is really to give you some insight, give you some food for thought, and hopefully give you something to take away with some actions to actually increase your inventory, your storage, and your processes around how you manage your stock. Appreciate you being here. You have a wonderful day. Cheers.